Pick up anything near you, your phone, a glass of water, a pen, a book. Feel the weight, feel the mass, feel the resistance when you push it. The object does not want to accelerate. It resists. It pushes back against your force. This resistance is inertia, and inertia comes from mass, and mass comes from somewhere. And the question of where mass comes from is the question that broke physics. That consumed 48 years of the most expensive, most ambitious, most international scientific project in human history. That required building a machine 27 kilometers in circumference, buried 100 meters under the Swiss-French border, accelerating particles to 99.999991% of the speed of light, and smashing them together at energies not seen since a trillionth of a second after the Big Bang. All to answer the question you just asked without thinking when you picked up your phone. Why does it have mass? Why does anything have mass? Why is there weight? Why is there substance? Why is there stuff? The answer is a field, an invisible field that fills every cubic centimeter of the universe, every cubic millimeter, every cubic nanometer, from the core of the sun to the void between galaxy clusters. From the interior of a neutron to the space between your atoms, you are immersed in it right now. You have been immersed in it since the moment of your conception, since the moment the universe cooled enough for the field to settle into its current state approximately 1 trillionth of a second after the Big Bang. Every atom in your body, every electron in every atom, every quark in every proton is interacting with this field at every instant. The field is here, the field is there, the field is everywhere, and you cannot detect it, cannot see it, cannot smell it, cannot taste it, cannot hear it, cannot feel it with any human sense or any instrument until the most expensive and most complex machine in human history was built specifically to excite this field just enough to produce a single quantum of vibration. One particle, one ripple in the invisible ocean, one Higgs boson. This field is called the Higgs field, and the particle associated with it, the quantum of its vibration, is called the Higgs boson, and the popular press calls it the God particle, and the physicists who named it that meant it as a joke, or as marketing, or as a publisher's decision to sell more books. Leon Lederman, the Nobel laureate who coined the term originally, wanted to call his 1993 book The Goddamn Particle because the Higgs boson was so difficult to find. The publisher refused, changed it to the God particle, a marketing decision, not a theological statement. But here is what I want to argue across this series. The name might be more accurate than anyone intended, not because the Higgs boson is divine, not because Peter Higgs is a prophet, not because CERN discovered God in a particle accelerator, but because the Higgs field has properties that are structurally identical to what every major religious tradition describes when it describes God. An invisible foundation that makes all existence possible, a ground of being that pervades all of reality, a presence that cannot be detected by any sense but without which nothing would exist. The Higgs field is not God, but the Higgs field does what every tradition says God does, makes existence possible, gives substance to the substanceless, gives being to what would otherwise be nothing. And the fact that physics discovered this field independently of any theological motivation and then accidentally named its particle the God particle might be the most meaningful accident in the history of science. But first, the physics. Because the physics must come first, must be rigorous, must be specific, must be the kind of physics that a physicist would recognize as correct. The theology means nothing if the physics is wrong. The parallels mean nothing if they are built on misunderstanding. So let me tell you what the Higgs field actually is, what it actually does, how it actually works, in the language of quantum field theory, in the mathematics of the Standard Model, in the precision of particle physics, and then we will see whether the theology follows. The story begins with a crisis. The deepest crisis in 20th century particle physics, the crisis of mass in the Standard Model. The Standard Model of particle physics is the most successful scientific theory ever constructed by human beings. This is not an exaggeration, not hyperbole, not the kind of superlative that scientists throw around casually. It is a precise factual statement. The Standard Model describes 3 of the 4 fundamental forces of nature. Electromagnetism, the force that holds atoms together, lights your room and carries your Wi-Fi signal. The strong nuclear force, the force that binds quarks into protons and neutrons into nuclei. The weak nuclear force, the force responsible for radioactive decay and the nuclear reactions that power the sun. It catalogues every fundamental particle ever discovered. 6 quarks arranged in 3 generations. Up and down, charm and strange, top and bottom. 6 leptons in 3 generations. Electron and electron neutrino. Muon and muon neutrino. Tau and tau neutrino. 4-gauge bosons that carry the forces. The photon for electromagnetism. The W plus and W minus and Z for the weak force. 8 gluons for the strong force, and 1 scalar boson. The Higgs, 17 fundamental particles. That is all. Everything in the universe, every star, every planet, every ocean, every cell, every thought, every feeling, every phenomenon you have ever observed or ever will observe is built from these 17 particles interacting through 3 forces. That is the Standard Model, the complete parts list of reality, and it works with terrifying precision. The anomalous magnetic dipole moment of the electron, predicted by the Standard Model using quantum electrodynamics. The prediction is G-2 divided by 2 equals 0.0011596521811643. The experimental measurement by the Harvard group led by Gerald Gabriels is 0.00115965218073. Agreement to 12 significant figures, 1 part in 10 trillion. If you measured the distance from New York to Los Angeles with this accuracy, you would be off by less than the width of a human hair. No other theory in any science, in any field, in any era of human civilization has achieved this precision. The Standard Model is not a hypothesis, not a model in the sense of an approximation. It is the most precisely confirmed description of physical reality ever produced. And it has a fatal flaw. A flaw that consumed particle physics for 2 decades. A flaw so fundamental that without its resolution the Standard Model would collapse into mathematical inconsistency. The equations of the Standard Model in their original form forbid mass. Not just the mass of one particle, all mass. Every fundamental particle in the Standard Model should be massless, according to the gauge symmetry that makes the theory work. Should fly at the speed of light. Should never form atoms. Should never create the material world. This is not an approximation, not a small discrepancy. It is a structural feature of the mathematics. The reason is gauge symmetry. Gauge symmetry is the deepest principle of the Standard Model. The principle that determines which forces exist, which particles exist, how they interact, everything. The Standard Model is built on gauge symmetries the way a building is built on foundations. Remove the symmetry and the theory collapses. What is gauge symmetry? It is a redundancy in the description of physics, a freedom to change certain mathematical quantities without changing any observable physical quantity. In electromagnetism, you can change the electromagnetic potential by adding the gradient of any function, and the electric and magnetic fields remain unchanged. The physics does not care which potential you use. This freedom is the U1 gauge symmetry of electromagnetism. And this symmetry requires the photon to exist, requires the photon to be massless, requires the electromagnetic force to have infinite range, gauge symmetry dictates the existence and properties of force-carrying particles. The Standard Model extends this principle. The gauge symmetry of the electromagnetic force is U(1). The gauge symmetry of the weak nuclear force is Su(2). Together they form the electroweak symmetry group Su, 2 times U1, and the strong force has its own gauge symmetry, Su(3). The complete gauge group of the Standard Model is Su 3 times Su 2 times U1. This mathematical structure determines everything: which particles exist, how they interact, what forces bind them. The gauge symmetry is the DNA of physics, but gauge symmetry has a price. Gauge symmetry forbids mass terms for the gauge bosons. If you write down a mass term for the W boson or the Z boson, a term proportional to the mass squared times the field squared, the gauge invariance is destroyed. The mathematical consistency of the theory is broken. The probabilities of physical processes stop adding up to 1. Predictions become infinite. The theory becomes nonsense. This is the mass problem, the most fundamental problem in particle physics in the 1960s. The W and Z bosons must have mass. Must, because the weak nuclear force is short range, only operates across distances smaller than the diameter of a proton, about 10 to the negative 15 meters. And in quantum field theory, the range of a force is inversely proportional to the mass of the boson that carries it. Long-range forces like electromagnetism are carried by massless bosons, photons. Short-range forces like the weak force must be carried by massive bosons. The W boson must have a mass of approximately 80 GeV. The Z boson must have a mass of approximately 91 GeV. These are enormous masses, 80 and 90 times the mass of a proton. The weak force bosons are heavy, must be heavy. The experimental data demands it. But the gauge symmetry forbids it. The gauge symmetry says the W and Z must be massless. Like the photon, the mathematics says massless. The experiments say massive. The theory and reality disagree. And when a theory this successful disagrees with reality about something this fundamental, the problem is not with the experiments. The problem is that the theory is incomplete. Something is missing. Some mechanism that gives mass to the W and Z bosons without breaking the gauge symmetry that makes the theory consistent. In 1964, 3 groups of physicists independently proposed the same solution. Robert Brout and François Englert in Brussels, published first on August 31st in Physical Review Letters. Peter Higgs in Edinburgh, published on October 19th in the same journal. Gerald Guralnick, Carl Hagen and Tom Kibble in London, published on November 16th. 3 papers published within weeks of each other. Same idea, same mechanism, same solution to the mass problem. The idea had been anticipated by Philip Anderson in 1962 inches, the context of condensed matter physics. Yoichiro Nambu had introduced the concept of spontaneous symmetry, breaking in particle physics in 1960, winning the Nobel Prize for it in 2008. But the specific application to the gauge boson mass problem was the work of these 3 groups in 1964. And the idea is extraordinary. Spontaneous symmetry breaking. Let me explain this precisely because it is one of the most beautiful and most misunderstood concepts in physics. A symmetry in physics means a transformation that leaves the equations unchanged. Rotate the equations of electromagnetism by any angle, and they look the same. Translate them to any position, and they look the same. The laws do not prefer any direction, do not prefer any location. The laws are perfectly balanced, perfectly symmetric, perfectly democratic. No direction is special, no point in space is privileged. But the state of the universe can break this symmetry even while the laws preserve it. The laws do not change. The equations are identical. But the specific configuration of the universe, the specific ground state, the specific vacuum, does not share the symmetry of the laws. The symmetry is hidden, not violated, not broken by the fundamental equations, broken by the solution. The laws are symmetric. The reality built on those laws is not. Consider a ferromagnet. The fundamental laws governing the iron atoms in a magnet are perfectly symmetric. No direction is preferred. The interaction between neighboring atoms depends only on the angle between their spins, not on the absolute direction. The laws are rotationally symmetric. But below the Curie temperature 770 degrees Celsius for iron, the atoms spontaneously align. All point in the same direction. Choose a direction, and the choice breaks the rotational symmetry. Not because the laws changed, because the system found its lowest energy state, and the lowest energy state is not symmetric. The symmetry is hidden in the ground state, present in the laws, absent in the reality. Consider water freezing into ice. The laws governing water molecules are rotationally symmetric, no direction preferred. But when water freezes, the crystal lattice picks specific directions. The hexagonal symmetry of ice is lower than the rotational symmetry of liquid water. The freezing breaks the symmetry, not the laws, the state. The Higgs mechanism is spontaneous symmetry breaking, applied to the electroweak gauge symmetry. The Higgs field has a potential energy function, and the shape of this potential is crucial. It is not a simple bowl with a minimum at zero. It is shaped like the bottom of a wine bottle, or a Mexican hat, a sombrero. The center of the potential at field value 0 is a local maximum, an unstable point, like a ball balanced on top of a hill, and around the center is a circular valley, a ring of minima. Every point on the ring is equally valid. The potential does not prefer any point on the ring over any other. The potential is symmetric, but the field must sit somewhere, must choose one specific point on the ring, must roll down from the unstable center to the stable valley. And when it does, the symmetry is spontaneously broken. The field has a non-zero value, a specific value, a specific direction in the internal space of the electroweak symmetry. And this choice, this specific non-zero value of the Higgs field throughout all of space, is what gives particles their mass. The mathematics is precise. The Higgs potential is V of phi equals negative mu squared times phi squared plus lambda times phi to the fourth. Where phi is the Higgs field, mu is a parameter with dimensions of mass, and lambda is a dimensionless coupling constant. The negative sign in front of mu squared is what makes the center unstable, what gives the potential its wine bottle shape. The minimum of this potential is not at phi equals 0. The minimum is at phi equals mu divided by the square root of 2 lambda. This is the vacuum expectation value. The value that the Higgs field takes throughout all of space in its lowest energy configuration, and this value has been measured. It is 246 GeV, 246 giga-electron volts. This number appears nowhere in the fundamental constants of nature. It emerges from the dynamics of the Higgs potential, from the interplay between mu and lambda, and it determines the mass of every particle that interacts with the Higgs field. And when particles interact with this non-zero field, they acquire mass. The mechanism is specific and mathematically precise. When a massless gauge boson interacts with the Higgs field at its non-zero vacuum expectation value, the interaction generates a term in the equations that looks exactly like a mass term. The mass appears without being put in by hand. The mass emerges from the interaction. The gauge symmetry is not broken in the laws, it is broken in the vacuum. And the breaking gives mass to the W and Z bosons, while leaving the photon massless. The W boson acquires a mass of 80.4 GeV. The Z boson acquires a mass of 91.2 GeV. The photon acquires zero mass. This is not a coincidence. This is the mathematical structure of the symmetry breaking. The electroweak symmetry SU, 2 times U1, breaks down to the electromagnetic symmetry U1. The 3 broken generators give mass to the W plus W minus and Z. The 1 unbroken generator keeps the photon massless. 3 massive bosons, 1 massless boson, exactly what the experiments observe. The theory works. And the Higgs field does not only give mass to the gauge bosons, it gives mass to the fermions too, to the quarks and leptons, through a different mechanism called Yukawa coupling. Each fermion interacts with the Higgs field with a specific coupling strength. The top quark has the largest Yukawa coupling, approximately 0.99, almost 1. It interacts with the Higgs field with nearly maximum strength, acquires a mass of 173 GeV. The electron has a tiny Yukawa coupling, approximately 0.000003. Interacts with the Higgs field almost not at all, acquires a mass of 0.511 MeV. The neutrinos interact with the Higgs field so weakly that their masses are almost zero, fractions of an electron volt. The mass hierarchy of the Standard Model, the fact that the top quark is 340,000 times heavier than the electron, is encoded in the Yukawa couplings. In the strength of each particle's interaction with the Higgs field is like a universal medium. Some particles push through it with great effort and are heavy. Others glide through it with almost no resistance and are light. Others ignore it entirely and are massless. The analogy that Peter Higgs himself reportedly appreciated is a cocktail party. Imagine a room full of people, evenly distributed, chatting in small groups. This is the Higgs field at its vacuum expectation value. Uniform, everywhere, filling the room. Now a celebrity enters, a prime minister, a film star. As she moves through the room, people cluster around her, crowd toward her, impede her motion. She acquires inertia. She is hard to accelerate. This is mass. A less famous person enters the same room and fewer people cluster. Less impedance, less inertia, less mass. An unknown person walks through and nobody notices. No clustering. No impedance, no inertia, no mass. The photon. The celebrity is the top quark. The crowd is the Higgs field. Mass is not what you are made of. Mass is how strongly the universe interacts with you. How much the Higgs field pays attention to you. How much the invisible foundation of reality resists your motion. But here is the subtle point that most popular science explanations miss completely. And it matters because it reveals something profound about what the Higgs field actually does. The Higgs mechanism does not give mass to protons and neutrons primarily, not even close. The mass of a proton is approximately 938 MeV. The mass of the 3 quarks inside the proton, 2 up quarks at approximately 2.2 MeV each, and 1 down quark at approximately 4.7 MeV, is only about 9.1 MeV total, less than 1% of the proton's mass. The other 99% comes from somewhere else entirely. It comes from the strong force, from quantum chromodynamics, from the energy of the gluon field that binds the quarks together. The gluons themselves are massless, but the energy of the gluon field is enormous, and through Einstein's E equals mc squared energy is mass. The binding energy of the strong force is so intense, so concentrated, so powerful, that it accounts for 99% of the mass of every proton and neutron in the universe. And since protons and neutrons make up 99.95% of the mass of ordinary matter, almost all of the mass of your body comes from the energy of the strong force, not from the Higgs field. When you step on a scale, 99% of the number you see is strong force binding energy. Only 1% is the Higgs mechanism giving mass to the quarks and electrons inside you. So what does the Higgs field actually do? Why is it essential? If only 1% of your mass comes from the Higgs mechanism, why did physicists spend $13.25 billion and 48 years looking for it? Why is it arguably the most important discovery in the history of particle physics? Because without the Higgs field, the electron would be massless. And this changes everything. Everything. A massless electron travels at the speed of light. It must. Massless particles are required by special relativity to move at exactly the speed of light. Not approximately. Exactly. A massless electron cannot slow down, cannot stop, cannot be captured, cannot orbit anything, cannot be bound to a proton by the electromagnetic force because a particle moving at the speed of light cannot be held in a bound orbit. No bound electrons means no atoms, period. The entire periodic table ceases to exist. Hydrogen ceases to exist. Without hydrogen, there are no stars. Stars are powered by hydrogen fusion. No hydrogen, no fusion, no stars, no starlight, no energy source for any process in the universe. Without heavier atoms, there is no carbon, no oxygen, no nitrogen, no iron, no chemistry, no molecules, no water, no amino acids, no proteins, no DNA, no cells, no organisms, no brains, no consciousness, no one to wonder why anything has mass. The cascade is absolute. Remove the electron's mass which the Higgs field provides, and you do not get a slightly different universe. You get no universe. Not no universe in the sense that nothing exists. In the sense that nothing structured exists. The universe would be a hot plasma of massless particles all moving at the speed of light. Quarks, electrons, neutrinos, photons, gluons, all massless, all moving at light speed, all unable to form bound states, all unable to create structure, all unable to generate the complexity that eventually produced a species capable of building a particle accelerator to discover why they exist. The Higgs field is not the source of most mass. The Higgs field is the source of the mass that makes structure possible. The mass that slows particles down from the speed of light. The mass that allows electrons to be captured by protons. The mass that allows atoms to form. The mass that allows chemistry to exist. The mass that allows stars to burn. The mass that allows planets to form. The mass that allows you to exist. Without the Higgs field, the universe would contain energy but no form. Existence but no structure. Being but no beings. The raw material of reality without anything made from it. And every religious tradition has a name for the invisible foundation that gives form to the formless, that gives substance to the substanceless, that gives being to what would otherwise be nothing. They call it God. The Quran says, Allah is the light of the heavens and the earth. Quran 24-35. Not a light within the heavens and the earth. The light of the heavens and the earth, the foundation, the substrate, the field that makes the heavens and the earth possible. Without this light, this foundation, this field, nothing has form, nothing has structure, nothing has being. Christianity says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Through him all things were made, and without him nothing was made that has been made." John 1-1-3. All things were made through this foundation. Without it, nothing was made. Nothing has form, nothing has structure, nothing has being. The Word is the creative principle that gives existence to everything, the field through which all things acquire their being. Hinduism says Brahman is the ground of all being. The Taittiriya Upanishad says that from Brahman space was born, from space air, from air fire, from fire water, from water earth, from earth plants, from plants food, from food the human being, the cascade of creation flowing from the invisible ground to the visible world, from the field to the particles, from the formless to the formed. Buddhism says all phenomena arise from conditions, from an invisible ground of dependent origination. Nothing exists independently. Everything arises from the interplay of conditions, from the field of interdependence that gives rise to all forms. 4 traditions, same structure, an invisible foundation that cannot be perceived directly, but without which nothing has form, nothing has structure, nothing has being. The Higgs field is not God. Nobody is claiming that. But the Higgs field does exactly what these traditions say God does. Provides the invisible foundation without which nothing in the universe has the mass needed to form structure. The parallel is structural, is specific, is not metaphor, is not analogy, is an exact functional correspondence between what physics discovered in a particle accelerator and what contemplatives discovered in silence across 4,000 years. In part 2, we go inside the machine, the Large Hadron Collider, 27 kilometers of superconducting magnets cooled to 1.9 Kelvin colder than outer space. 2 beams of protons circling in opposite directions at 99.9999991% of the speed of light, crossing paths at 4 points where cathedral-sized detectors Atlas and CMS record the debris of 14 TeV collisions. We follow the 48-year hunt from Peter Higgs's 1964 paper, rejected by the first journal he submitted it to, through the cancellation of the American Superconducting Supercollider in 1993, through the construction of the LHC, through the false alarms and the near misses, to July 4, 2012. The day they found it at 5 sigma. The day they proved that the invisible field is real, that the foundation of all structure exists, that the thing every tradition calls the ground of being is not metaphysics, is physics, is a field with a vacuum expectation value of 246 GeV, is everywhere, is in you, right now, giving you mass, giving you form, giving you being. Peter Higgs was 34 years old and unknown, a lecturer in mathematical physics at the University of Edinburgh, not a professor, a lecturer, the lower rank, the kind of position that comes with a modest salary, a small office and no research group. He had published a handful of papers on symmetry breaking in condensed matter physics. None had attracted significant attention. He was quiet, reserved, shy by most accounts. The kind of physicist who worked alone in his office scribbling equations on paper and went for long walks in the Cairngorm Mountains thinking about quantum field theory. Not the kind who commanded attention at conferences or built research empires or appeared on television explaining science to the public. In the summer of 1964, he read a paper by Abraham Klein and Benjamin Lee that discussed problems with a model by Schwinger. Something about the paper triggered an idea. He went for a walk in the highlands. On the walk, the idea crystallized. He saw how to give mass to gauge bosons without breaking gauge symmetry. He went home, wrote it down, a short paper, barely 2 pages, submitted it to the European journal Physics Letters on the 27th of August 1964. The paper proposed that a scalar field permeating all of space could give mass to gauge bosons through spontaneous symmetry breaking. The mechanism was elegant, mathematically tight, physically clear. The journal rejected it. The editor, a physicist named Jacques Prentke at CERN, considered the paper not of sufficient relevance to physics. Not of sufficient relevance. The mechanism that would become the cornerstone of the standard model. The mechanism that would explain why anything in the universe has mass. The mechanism that would win the Nobel Prize. The mechanism that would require building the most expensive scientific instrument in human history to confirm, was rejected as irrelevant. Higgs was disappointed but not defeated. He revised the paper, added a crucial paragraph at the end, a paragraph that would change the history of physics. He pointed out that the theory predicted a new particle, a massive scalar boson, an excitation of the field, a particle that had never been observed, a particle whose discovery would confirm that the invisible field is real. Without this paragraph, the theory would have been a mathematical curiosity. With it, the theory became testable, falsifiable, scientific. The paragraph gave experimentalists something to look for, a target, a prediction that could be confirmed or refuted by building a machine powerful enough to produce the particle. He resubmitted the revised paper to Physical Review Letters, the American journal. It was accepted. Published on the 19th of October, 1964. 2.5 pages, one of the shortest papers to ever change the foundations of physics. And then, nothing happened. Not immediately. The paper accumulated citations slowly, discussed in specialist circles. Stephen Weinberg incorporated the Higgs mechanism into his 1967 electroweak unification theory. Abdus Salam did the same independently. Gerardus Hooft proved in 1971 that the theory with the Higgs mechanism was renormalizable, meaning it made finite sensible predictions at all energies. This was the mathematical proof that the Higgs mechanism worked. That it was not just a clever idea but a consistent mathematical framework. Hooft's proof transformed the electroweak theory from a speculative proposal into a serious candidate for the theory of the weak force. Weinberg and Salam won the Nobel Prize in 1979 for the electroweak unification. The Higgs mechanism was central to their theory, but Higgs himself remained a lecturer in Edinburgh, quiet, unknown to the public, known only to specialists. The problem was that the Higgs boson had not been found. The mechanism was theoretically beautiful, mathematically consistent, but the particle it predicted had never been observed. And in physics, a theory without experimental confirmation is just mathematics, just a story told in equations. The Higgs boson had to be found, had to be produced in a particle accelerator, had to be detected by instruments, had to leave its signature in the data. Without the particle, the field was a hypothesis. With the particle, the field was reality. But finding the Higgs boson was extraordinarily difficult. The difficulty had 3 dimensions. First, the mass was unknown. The theory predicted that the Higgs boson exists, but the theory did not predict its mass. The mass depends on the parameter lambda in the Higgs potential. And lambda is a free parameter, not determined by the theory. Could be anything. The Higgs boson could be as light as 10 GeV or as heavy as 1000 GeV. The search had to cover this entire range. Had to look everywhere. Had to be comprehensive. A needle in a haystack where you do not know how big the needle is. Second, the Higgs boson is unstable, spectacularly unstable. It decays almost instantly after being produced. The lifetime of a Higgs boson at 125 GeV is approximately 1.6 times 10 to the negative 22 seconds, a 10 sextillionth of a second. In that time, light travels approximately 10 to the negative 14 meters, less than the diameter of a proton. The Higgs boson does not exist long enough to travel any measurable distance. It is born and dies at the same point. You cannot detect the Higgs boson directly. You can only detect what it decays into, the debris, the daughter particles, 2 photons, 2 Z bosons, 2 W bosons, a bottom quark and an anti-bottom quark, a tau lepton and an anti-tau lepton. These are the decay channels, the signatures, the fingerprints left by a particle that existed for a 10 sextillionth of a second. Third, the production rate is tiny. The Higgs boson is produced by the most energetic process in the Standard Model, gluon-gluon fusion. 2 gluons from 2 colliding protons fuse through a virtual top quark loop to produce a single Higgs boson. The probability of this process occurring in any given proton-proton collision is approximately 1 in 10 billion. For every 10 billion collisions, one Higgs boson is produced, and then it decays instantly into particles that look almost identical to the particles produced by a billion other processes that do not involve the Higgs. The signal is buried in noise, a whisper in a hurricane, a single specific note in the roar of a stadium. To find the Higgs boson, you need three things: energy enough to produce a particle of unknown mass up to about 1 TeV, luminosity enough collisions per second that the 1 in 10 billion production rate gives you enough Higgs bosons to see a statistical signal above the background noise, and detectors sophisticated enough to measure the decay products with sufficient precision to reconstruct the mass of the particle that produced them. This is why they built the Large Hadron Collider. The LHC is the largest, most complex, most expensive scientific instrument ever constructed. A circular tunnel, 27 kilometers in circumference, buried 100 meters beneath the Swiss-French border near Geneva. The tunnel was originally dug in the 1980s for the Large Electron Positron Collider (LEP). When LEP was decommissioned in 2000, the tunnel was refitted for the LHC. The cost, approximately $13.25 billion, built by CERN, the European Organization for Nuclear Research. Over 10,000 scientists and engineers from more than 100 countries. The most international scientific project in history. Inside the tunnel are 1,232 dipole magnets, each 15 meters long, each weighing 35 tons, each containing coils of niobium titanium, superconducting cable, cooled by superfluid helium to 1.9 Kelvin, negative 271.3 degrees Celsius, colder than outer space. Outer space is 2.7 Kelvin. The LHC magnets are colder than the cosmic microwave background radiation, colder than almost anything in the observable universe. The superconducting magnets generate a magnetic field of 8.3 Tesla, strong enough to bend the paths of protons moving at 99.9999991% of the speed of light. At this speed, a proton circles the 27-kilometer tunnel 11,245 times per second. Each proton carries an energy of 6.5 TeV, tera electron volts, trillion electron volts, 6,500 times the rest mass energy of a proton. The proton is moving so fast that its relativistic mass is 6,500 times its rest mass. Time dilation slows the proton's internal clock by a factor of 6,500 relative to the laboratory. The proton is living in a different temporal reality from the physicists who are watching it. Two beams of protons circulate in opposite directions in separate beam pipes. Each beam contains approximately 2,808 bunches of protons. Each bunch contains approximately 115 billion protons. The bunches are spaced 25 nanoseconds apart. At 4 points around the ring, the beams are steered into head-on collision. The bunches cross through each other. The protons are not aimed at each other individually. The bunches are clouds of protons passing through each other, and in each crossing, a handful of protons from each bunch collide directly. Approximately 40 million bunch crossings per second, approximately 600 million proton-proton collisions per second. Each collision produces a shower of hundreds of particles spraying outward from the collision point at nearly the speed of light. At the collision point sit the detectors, ATLAS and CMS, the two general-purpose detectors designed to find the Higgs boson. ATLAS is enormous, 46 meters long, 25 meters in diameter, 7,000 tons, the size of half a football field, the weight of the Eiffel Tower. It contains 100 million electronic channels reading out data from every collision, tracking every charged particle, measuring every photon, detecting every muon, reconstructing the full three-dimensional trajectory and energy of every particle produced in every collision 40 million times per second. CMS is smaller but heavier, 21 meters long, 15 meters in diameter, 14,000 tons, twice the weight of Atlas in half the volume. It uses a different magnet technology, a solenoid instead of a toroid, and different detector materials. The two experiments are intentionally different, built by different teams, using different technologies, so that if one experiment claims to see the Higgs boson, the other can independently confirm or refute the claim. Redundancy, cross-checking. The scientific method applied at the scale of cathedral-sized instruments. The amount of data produced is staggering. Each collision produces approximately 1 megabyte of data, at 600 million collisions per second. The raw data rate is 600 terabytes per second, more than all the world's telecommunications traffic combined. This is more data than can be stored by any technology that exists. The solution is triggering. Hardware and software filters that examine each collision in real time and decide within microseconds whether the collision is interesting enough to record. The trigger system discards 99.999% of collisions and records approximately 1,000 per second. These 1,000 events per second are transmitted to a worldwide computing grid. 170 computing centers in 42 countries, processing the data in parallel. The worldwide LHC computing grid, the largest distributed computing system ever built. This is the machine they built to find one particle, to detect one ripple in an invisible field, to confirm a 2-page paper written by a quiet lecturer in Edinburgh in the summer of 1964. The search took decades. The first accelerator to seriously look for the Higgs was LEP at CERN from 1989 to 2000. LEP was an electron-positron collider, clean collisions, low background noise, but limited energy. LEP reached collision energies of 209 GeV, enough to exclude a Higgs boson lighter than 114.4 GeV. It did not find the Higgs, but it narrowed the search. The Tevatron at Fermilab near Chicago ran from 1983 to 2011, a proton-antiproton collider with collision energies up to 1.96 TeV. The Tevatron experiments CDF and D0 searched for the Higgs for over 2 decades. They saw hints, tantalizing hints, a small excess of events around 125 GeV, not statistically significant enough to claim discovery, not enough data, not enough luminosity, not enough collisions. The Tevatron came close, agonizingly close, but did not get there. Then the LHC. But before the LHC there was supposed to be something bigger. The superconducting supercollider, the SSC, approved by the United States Congress in 1987. To be built in Waxahachie, Texas, a tunnel 87 kilometers in circumference, 3 times the size of the LHC, collision energies of 40 TeV. Enough to find the Higgs boson even at the highest possible mass. The project began construction. 17 kilometers of tunnel were dug. $2 billion were spent. And then in 1993, Congress cancelled it. Budget overruns. Political opposition. The end of the Cold War had removed the competitive pressure that had driven large-scale American science projects. The SSC was dead. The tunnel in Texas was partially filled with water and abandoned. American particle physics lost its flagship project. Europe stepped in. CERN proposed the LHC, using the existing LEP tunnel, smaller than the SSC, lower energy but buildable, fundable, international. The project was approved in 1994. Construction began in 1998, and the engineering challenges were extraordinary. First beams circulated on the 10th of September 2008. The world watched. Headlines everywhere. The machine worked. Protons circled the 27-kilometer ring in both directions. Celebration at CERN. Then, 9 days later, on September 19, catastrophe. A faulty electrical connection between two magnets caused an arc that ruptured the helium containment system. 6 tons of liquid helium vaporized in seconds. The pressure wave damaged 53 magnets over a length of 700 meters. The repair took 14 months and cost $40 million. The LHC restarted in November 2009 at reduced energy, gradually increased. By 2011, it was running at 7 TeV, collision energy, half of its design energy, and accumulating data at an extraordinary rate. The data poured in, billions of collisions recorded, millions of events analyzed. The ATLAS and CMS collaborations, each comprising over 3,000 physicists from dozens of countries, independently searching the data for the signature of the Higgs boson. The signature they were looking for was a bump, a small excess of events at a specific mass value. In particle physics, you do not see particles directly. You see their decay products. You measure the energies and momenta of the daughter particles and work backward to calculate the mass of the parent particle. If the Higgs boson decays into 2 photons, you measure the 2 photons and calculate the invariant mass of the photon pair. Most photon pairs come from background processes and produce a smooth distribution of invariant masses. But if the Higgs exists, then some photon pairs come from Higgs decay and produce a bump, a small peak in the distribution at the mass of the Higgs. The bump sits on top of the smooth background, a statistical fluctuation, a whisper above the noise. And the question is whether the bump is real signal or just statistical noise. Random fluctuation. A coin landing heads 10 times in a row. Unlikely but possible. Particle physics uses a strict standard for discovery. 5 sigma, a statistical significance of 5 standard deviations. This means the probability that the observed bump is a random fluctuation of the background is less than 1 in 3.5 million, less than 0.00003%. This is the threshold. Below 5 sigma you have evidence, an interesting hint, a reason to keep looking. At 5 sigma you have a discovery, a result you can stake your career on, a result you can announce to the world. By December 2011, both ATLAS and CMS had accumulated enough data to see something. ATLAS reported a bump at approximately 126 GeV, with a significance of 3.6 sigma. CMS reported a bump at approximately 124 GeV, with a significance of 3.1 sigma. Separately, each result was not significant enough for discovery. Together they were electrifying. 2 independent experiments using different technologies, analyzing different data sets, seeing bumps at approximately the same mass. The probability that both bumps were random fluctuations was astronomically small, but the formal significance was not yet 5 sigma. The physicists waited, accumulated more data, ran through the spring of 2012. On the 4th of July 2012, CERN scheduled a special seminar. The date was not accidental. It coincided with the International Conference on High Energy Physics in Melbourne, Australia. The seminar would be broadcast live worldwide. Physicists who could not get into the auditorium watched on screens set up around the CERN campus. Physicists in Melbourne watched at 3 a.m. local time. Physicists around the world watched online. The expectations were enormous. Rumors had been circulating for weeks. Something had been found, something significant. The CERN auditorium holds approximately 400 people. It was packed. Physicists had camped overnight in the hallway to get seats. Students sat on the floor. People stood 3 deep against the walls. Peter Higgs himself was present, 83 years old, white-haired, slightly stooped. sitting in the front row. He had been invited personally by CERN Director General Rolf Dieter Hoyer. 48 years after his 2-page paper, Francois Englert was there too, 80 years old, sitting next to Higgs. The two men who had independently proposed the mechanism that gave mass to the universe, sitting side by side, waiting to learn whether the universe had confirmed their mathematics. Joe Incandela presented the CMS results first, methodical, careful, building the case systematically, showing the data channel by channel, the diphoton channel, 2 photons from a Higgs decay, a clear bump at 125.3 GeV, rising above the smooth background with unmistakable clarity, the 4 lepton channel, 2 Z bosons each decaying to 2 leptons, another bump, same mass, same location, different decay channel, same particle, the significance, 5 sigma, 5 standard deviations above background, the probability of a random fluctuation producing this signal by chance, less than 1 in 3.5 million. Discovery threshold. The room erupted in applause. Then Fabiola Gianotti presented the atlas results. Same story, different experiment, different detector, different analysis team, different data, same result. A bump at 126 GeV, 5 sigma independently. The diphoton channel showed it. The 4 lepton channel confirmed it. 2 experiments, 2 teams of 3,000 physicists each, 2 completely independent analyses. Same particle, same mass, same significance, both at 5 sigma. The probability that both results were random fluctuations simultaneously was less than 1 in 10 trillion. This was real. This was not noise. This was a particle. Peter Higgs wept, quietly, in the front row, his hand trembling slightly as he removed his glasses and wiped his eyes with a handkerchief. 48 years. A 2-page paper rejected by the first journal. A mechanism dismissed by many physicists as a mathematical curiosity for decades. A career spent in the modest position of lecturer, then eventually professor at Edinburgh. Never aggressive about claiming credit, never political, never self-promoting, just waiting. Waiting for the technology to catch up with the mathematics. And now, the most powerful machine ever built by human civilization had found his particle, had confirmed his field, had proved that the invisible foundation he described in 2.5 pages in 1964 was real. Francois Englert, sitting next to him, was visibly emotional as well. The two men who had never met before, their work was connected by history, looked at each other. Higgs reached over and shook Englert's hand. The handshake was photographed. It became one of the most reproduced images in the history of physics. Rolf Dieter Hoyer approached the microphone. He paused, looked at the audience, and said simply, "I think we have it." The audience erupted again, sustained applause, standing ovation. The champagne appeared from somewhere. The press conferences began. The headlines circled the world within minutes. They had found the God particle. Now, what did they actually find? What is the Higgs boson physically? Not God, not a divine being, not proof of a creator in any theological sense. They found a particle, a boson, spin 0. The only fundamental scalar particle ever discovered. Every other particle in the standard model has spin 1/2 or spin 1. The Higgs boson has spin 0. It is unique in this respect, fundamentally different from every other particle in nature. Its mass is 125.1 GeV, approximately 133 times the mass of a proton. It decays into pairs of particles through every channel the standard model predicts. 2 photons, 2 Z bosons, each of which then decays to 2 leptons, giving the golden channel of 4 leptons that provides the cleanest signal. 2 W bosons, a bottom quark and an anti-bottom quark, a tau lepton and an anti-tau lepton. The branching ratios, the probability of each decay channel match the standard model predictions. The production cross-section, the probability of creating a Higgs boson in a proton-proton collision matches. The spin and parity quantum numbers match. Every measurement taken since 2012 is consistent with the standard model Higgs boson. No deviations, no surprises, no anomalies. No hints of new physics beyond what Higgs-Brout, Englert, Guralnik-Hagen and Kibble proposed in 1964. What this proves is profound. The Higgs field is real. The invisible field with a vacuum expectation value of 246 GeV that fills every point in the universe is not a mathematical abstraction, not a convenient fiction inserted into the equations to make them work, not a calculational trick. It is a physical field, as real as the electromagnetic field that carries the light from this screen to your eyes, as real as the gravitational field that holds you in your chair, as real as the floor beneath your feet. The particle proves the field the way a wave proves the ocean. You cannot see the ocean from orbit, but if you see waves, you know the ocean is there. The Higgs boson is the wave, the Higgs field is the ocean, and the ocean is everywhere. In this room, in your body, in the space between your atoms, in the void between galaxies, in every point in the observable universe, filling all of space with a non-zero value of 246 GeV, a value that gives electrons their mass, that gives quarks their mass, that enables atoms to exist, that enables chemistry to exist, that enables you to exist. In October 2013, the Nobel Prize in Physics was awarded to Peter Higgs and François Englert for the theoretical discovery of a mechanism that contributes to our understanding of the origin of massive subatomic particles. Higgs was 84, Englert was 80. Robert Brout, who would have shared the prize, had died in 2011. The Nobel Prize is not awarded posthumously. Guralnik, Hagen and Kibble were excluded by the Nobel rule, limiting the prize to 3 recipients. The injustice of the exclusion was widely noted, but the Nobel Committee's rules are rigid. Higgs, who had avoided publicity his entire career, gave one of the shortest Nobel lectures in history. Modest, technical, understated, the way he had always been. 48 years from paper to proof. A 2-page manuscript rejected by one journal. A $13.25 billion machine. 10,000 scientists from over 100 countries. 27 kilometers of superconducting magnets colder than outer space. 600 million collisions per second. 1 Higgs boson per 10 billion collisions. A bump on a graph. 5 sigma. And a quiet man weeping in the front row because the universe had confirmed his mathematics. They proved the invisible is real. They proved that the foundation exists. They proved that there is an invisible field filling all of space that gives form to the formless, and substance to the substanceless, and being to what would otherwise be nothing. They proved it with the most rigorous methodology human civilization has ever developed, with redundant experiments and independent analyses and 5 sigma statistical significance and peer review and replication. They proved it beyond any reasonable doubt. And the question that the discovery leaves unanswered is perhaps more profound than the discovery itself. In part 3, we confront it. Why does the Higgs field have the value it has? Why 246 GeV? Why is the Higgs boson mass 125 GeV? These numbers are not predicted by the standard model. They are free parameters, inputs that must be measured, not derived. And if the vacuum expectation value were even slightly different, if it were 240 GeV instead of 246, or 250 instead of 246, the masses of the W and Z bosons would change. The mass of the electron would change. The chemistry of the universe would change. The stars would burn differently or not at all. Life as we know it would be impossible. The value is fine-tuned. exquisitely fine-tuned. And the question of why it has this specific value, the value that allows atoms and stars and planets and life and consciousness, is one of the deepest unsolved problems in all of physics. The hierarchy problem, the naturalness problem, the fine-tuning problem, and every proposed solution points in the same direction, toward the question that physics cannot answer and theology cannot avoid. Is the universe designed? Or are we the luckiest accident in the history of existence? The Higgs boson has a mass of 125.1 GeV. This number was measured on the 4th of July 2012 by 2 independent experiments at the Large Hadron Collider. It is one of the most precisely determined quantities in particle physics, confirmed by over a decade of subsequent measurements, refined to 125.11, plus or minus 0.11 GeV, known to better than 1 part in 1,000. And it should not be this number, not according to the Standard Model, not according to the mathematical framework that predicted the Higgs boson's existence in the first place. According to the Standard Model, the Higgs boson mass should be enormous, not 125 GeV, something closer to 10 to the 19 GeV. The Planck mass, 10 million trillion times larger than the measured value. The discrepancy between the expected mass and the measured mass is not a factor of 2 or 10 or 100. It is a factor of 10 to the 17th, 100 quadrillion. This is the hierarchy problem, the deepest fine-tuning problem in fundamental physics, and it has consumed theoretical particle physics for 4 decades without resolution. Let me explain why. In quantum field theory, particles are not simple objects. A particle is surrounded by a cloud of virtual particles, quantum fluctuations. The vacuum is not empty. The vacuum is a seething foam of particle-antiparticle pairs appearing from nothing, existing for a fleeting instant and annihilating back into nothing. These virtual particles interact with real particles. They modify the properties of real particles. They contribute to the mass of real particles through quantum corrections called radiative corrections or loop corrections. For most particles, this is manageable. The mass of the electron, for example, receives quantum corrections from virtual photons and virtual electron-positron pairs. These corrections are small, logarithmic. They modify the electron's mass by a small, calculable amount. The bare mass plus the corrections gives the physical mass. No problem. The Higgs boson is different. The Higgs boson is a scalar particle, spin 0, and scalar particles receive quantum corrections to their mass that are not small, not logarithmic, quadratic. The correction to the Higgs boson mass squared is proportional to the square of the highest energy scale in the theory. This is called the quadratic divergence. And it changes everything. Here is the mathematics. The quantum correction to the Higgs boson mass squared from a virtual particle of mass m running in a loop is approximately delta mh squared equals lambda over 16 pi squared times lambda squared, where lambda is the coupling constant and lambda is the ultraviolet cutoff, the highest energy at which the Standard Model is valid. If the Standard Model is valid up to the Planck scale, which is the natural assumption since we know of no new physics between the electroweak scale at 246 GeV and the Planck scale at 10 to the 19 GeV, a desert of 16 orders of magnitude, with nothing in between. Then lambda equals the Planck mass, approximately 1.2 times 10 to the 19 GeV. Let me make this concrete. The top quark is the heaviest particle in the Standard Model. It has the strongest coupling to the Higgs boson. Its contribution to the Higgs mass correction is the largest. The calculation gives a correction of approximately negative 10 to the 38 GeV squared. This is not a small adjustment. This is not a minor tweak. This is a number with 38 digits. The physical Higgs mass squared is 125 squared, approximately 15,000. 625 GeV squared, a number with 5 digits. The quantum correction has 38 digits. The correction is 10,000 trillion times larger than the physical mass. It is as if you are trying to weigh a feather, and the quantum effects of the measurement are heavier than a galaxy. For the physical Higgs mass to be 125 GeV, the bare mass in the fundamental theory must cancel the quantum correction to extraordinary precision. The bare mass squared must be approximately -10 to the 38 plus 15,625 GeV squared. Two numbers that have no known reason to be related must cancel each other to 1 part in 10 to the 34. 34 decimal places of cancellation. This is like discovering that your bank account balance is exactly $125, a perfectly ordinary number, and then requesting a detailed statement and discovering that your deposits total 99 decillion, 999, nonillion, 999, octillion, 999, septillion, 999, sextillion, 996, quintillion, 863 quadrillion, 366 trillion, 107 billion, 917 million, $975,552, and your withdrawals total 99 decillion, 999, nonillion, 999, octillion, 999, septillion, 999, sextillion, 996 quintillion, 863 quadrillion, 366 trillion, 107 billion, 917 million, $975,552. The deposits and withdrawals cancel to 34 decimal places, leaving exactly $125. The final balance is reasonable, but the way it was achieved demands an explanation. Either there is a mechanism, a rule, a system that forces the deposits and withdrawals to cancel with this precision, or someone arranged it, deliberately, with 34 digits of intentional precision. Physicists call this the naturalness problem, a term coined by Gerard 't Hooft in 1979. 't Hooft argued that a physical quantity is natural if it is of order 1 in appropriate units, that small numbers should have explanations, that extreme cancellations between unrelated quantities should not occur in a fundamental theory without a symmetry or mechanism forcing them. In a natural theory, the parameters are of order 1, no extreme cancellations, no suspicious coincidences, no fine-tuning. No 34-digit cancellations between deposits and withdrawals. The standard model with a Higgs mass of 125 GeV and no new physics up to the Planck scale is supremely unnatural. The most unnatural theory in the history of physics, by a factor of 10 to the 34. Every physicist who works on the hierarchy problem will tell you the same thing. Something is wrong with this picture. Either the standard model is incomplete and there is new physics between the electroweak scale and the Planck scale that explains the cancellation, or the cancellation is being imposed by something outside the standard model, by some principle or mechanism or intelligence or selection effect that forces the Higgs mass to be light for reasons the standard model cannot explain. This is not a minor technical issue in particle physics. This is a crisis, a foundational crisis, about whether the universe is natural or fine-tuned, about whether physics can explain everything or whether some things simply are the way they are without deeper reason, about whether the constants of nature are determined by law or selected by something else. And the Higgs mass is not the only fine-tuned quantity. The vacuum expectation value of 246 GeV determines through the Yukawa couplings the masses of all fermions, and these masses must fall within extremely narrow ranges for the universe to produce anything interesting. Consider what happens if the Higgs vacuum expectation value changes by even a small amount. The exercise is illuminating because it reveals how razor-thin the margin is. If the VeV was 0, the electroweak symmetry would be unbroken. The W and Z bosons would be massless like the photon. The weak force would be long-range like electromagnetism. All fermions would be massless. Electrons, quarks, neutrinos, all massless. All moving at the speed of light. No atoms, no chemistry, no structure of any kind. A universe of massless particles and long-range forces. Photons, W bosons, Z bosons, all propagating at the speed of light through a featureless plasma forever. Nothing would ever slow down, nothing would ever bind, nothing would ever form. The universe would be maximally symmetric, maximally boring, maximally dead. If the VeV were twice the actual value, 492 GeV, instead of 246, then all particle masses would double. The electron mass would be 1.02 MeV instead of 0.511 MeV. The up quark mass would be 4.4 MeV instead of 2.2 MeV. The down quark mass would be 9.4 MeV instead of 4.7 MeV. These changes sound small. They are catastrophic. The proton-neutron mass difference depends critically on the up-down quark mass difference. In our universe, the down quark is heavier than the up quark by about 2.5 MeV. This makes the neutron heavier than the proton by 1.293 MeV. Neutrons decay to protons through beta decay. This is essential. If the mass difference were reversed, if the proton were heavier than the neutron, then protons would decay to neutrons. Hydrogen, the simplest atom, one proton, one electron, would be unstable. Every hydrogen atom in the universe would decay. No hydrogen means no water. No hydrogen means no stars. Stars are powered by hydrogen fusion. No hydrogen fusion means no energy source for any process in the universe. The lights go out permanently. If the VeV were 5 times larger, 1,230, GeV, the electron mass, would be 2.55 MeV. The electron would be heavier than the up-down quark mass difference. Electron capture by protons would become energetically favorable everywhere. Protons would capture electrons and become neutrons throughout the universe. All atoms would dissolve into neutrons. The universe would become a sea of neutron matter. No atoms, no chemistry, no complexity, just neutrons. The proton-neutron mass difference in our universe, 1.293 MeV, is determined by the Higgs V through the quark masses. Change the VeV by more than about 2 to 3% in either direction, and the nuclear physics changes enough to prevent the production of carbon and oxygen in stellar interiors. The triple alpha process that makes carbon in red giant stars depends sensitively on a nuclear resonance. The Hoyle state at 7.656 MeV in carbon 1, 2. This resonance depends on the nuclear force, which depends on the pion mass, which depends on the quark masses, which depend on the Higgs VeV. Change the VeV by a few percent, and the Hoyle state shifts out of resonance. Carbon is not produced. No carbon means no organic chemistry. No organic chemistry means no DNA, no proteins, no life. The universe produces hydrogen and helium, and nothing else interesting. Forever. The fine-tuning extends to the Higgs boson mass itself. At 125 GeV, the Higgs mass sits in a peculiar window. It is in the range where the standard model vacuum is metastable. Not absolutely stable. Not rapidly unstable, metastable. The vacuum we live in is not the lowest energy state of the Higgs potential. There is a lower energy state at extremely high field values, but the barrier between our vacuum and the true vacuum is so high that the tunneling time, the time for a quantum fluctuation to push us over the barrier, is enormously longer than the age of the universe. We live in a false vacuum, but a very long-lived false vacuum. A false vacuum that will last for a time much greater than the current age of the universe, 13.8 billion years, possibly 10 to the 100 years or more. If the Higgs mass were slightly higher, above about 130 GeV, the vacuum would be absolutely stable, safe, eternal. The Higgs potential would have no deeper minimum. Our vacuum would be the true vacuum, the lowest possible energy state. No risk of tunneling, no possibility of catastrophic vacuum decay, a comfortable universe. If the Higgs mass were slightly lower, below about 120 GeV, the vacuum would be unstable, would tunnel to the true vacuum on cosmological timescales, possibly rapidly. A bubble of true vacuum would nucleate somewhere in the universe. The bubble wall would expand at nearly the speed of light. Inside the bubble, the Higgs VeV would be different. All particle masses would be different. All chemistry would be different. All structure would dissolve. The bubble would sweep across the observable universe, destroying everything, and we would not be here to discuss it because the vacuum would have decayed long ago. The measured Higgs mass, 125.1 GeV, sits exactly in the metastable window, high enough that the universe survives for at least 10 to the 100 years, low enough that the vacuum is not absolutely stable. Our universe is balanced on a knife edge between eternal stability and catastrophic decay, living in a false vacuum, a temporary home, but temporary on a timescale so vast that it might as well be eternal. The vacuum will outlast the stars, will outlast the galaxies, will outlast the era of stellar formation by a factor that defies comprehension. But it is not absolutely permanent. It is contingent, provisional, a metastable state that could in principle end. The Higgs mass places us exactly in this window, not by necessity, not by any known mechanism, by what appears to be exquisite fine-tuning. The question is why? Why is the Higgs mass 125 GeV when the quantum corrections push it toward 10 to the 19 GeV? Why does the vacuum expectation value have the specific value that allows atoms and stars and life? Why is everything fine-tuned? Physics has proposed three broad answers. The first answer is supersymmetry, SUSY, proposed in the early 1970s by Julius Wess and Bruno Zumino, among others. The idea is elegant, a new symmetry of nature, a symmetry between bosons and fermions. For every boson in the standard model, there is a fermion partner. For every fermion, a boson partner. The electron has a scalar partner called the selectron. The quark has a partner called the squark. The photon has a partner called the photino. The gluon has a partner called the gluino. Every particle doubled, a mirror standard model with opposite statistics. And the mirror particles solve the hierarchy problem automatically. The quantum correction to the Higgs mass from a fermion loop is negative. The correction from a boson loop is positive. If every fermion has a boson partner with the same mass and the same coupling to the Higgs, the corrections cancel exactly, identically. To all orders in perturbation theory, the quadratic divergence disappears, not by fine-tuning, by symmetry. The hierarchy problem is solved the way all good problems in physics are solved, by discovering a symmetry that makes the problem impossible. The Higgs mass is naturally light because supersymmetry forces it to be light. The cancellation is not accidental, is not a coincidence, is required by the symmetry, mathematically guaranteed. The way gauge symmetry guarantees the photon is massless. Supersymmetry guarantees the Higgs is light. Supersymmetry was the dominant paradigm in theoretical particle physics for 3 decades, from the early 1980s through the 2010s. Thousands of papers, hundreds of PhD theses, entire careers built on supersymmetric model building. The supersymmetric partners were expected to have masses in the hundreds of GeV to low TeV range. right where the LHC could find them. The LHC was designed in part to discover supersymmetry. It was considered almost a certainty by many theorists. Nima Arkani Hamed at the Institute for Advanced Study said before the LHC turned on that he would bet his house on finding supersymmetric particles at the LHC. The LHC found the Higgs boson and nothing else. No selectrons, no squarks, no gluinos, no charginos, no neutralinos, no supersymmetric particles of any kind. After over a decade of searching at the highest energies ever achieved by human technology, the LHC has excluded supersymmetric partner particles below, approximately 2 TeV for the strongly produced particles and below several hundred GeV for the electroweakly produced ones. The simplest, most natural supersymmetric models, the models that most elegantly solve the hierarchy problem, have been ruled out. More complex models survive, but only by pushing the partner masses to higher values, which reintroduces the very fine-tuning that supersymmetry was invented to avoid. The cure becomes the disease. Supersymmetry is not dead, technically, but the most motivated versions of it are, and many physicists who spent their careers building supersymmetric models have quietly moved on. The second answer is the multiverse. The idea that our universe is one of an astronomically large number of universes, each with different values of the fundamental constants, different Higgs, VEVs, different particle masses, different physics. In most of these universes, the Higgs VEV is not fine-tuned. The electron is too heavy, or too light or massless. Atoms do not form. Stars do not burn. Chemistry does not work. Life does not exist. Nobody observes anything. Nobody asks why the constants have the values they have, because nobody exists. But in a tiny fraction of universes, by pure statistical chance, the constants fall in the narrow range that allows complexity, that allows atoms, that allows chemistry, that allows evolution, that allows consciousness, that allows observers. We necessarily find ourselves in one of these rare universes because we could not exist in any other. This is the anthropic principle. We observe a fine-tuned universe because only a fine-tuned universe contains observers. String theory provides a theoretical framework for the multiverse, the string landscape. Leonard Susskind coined the term in 2003. String theory requires extra spatial dimensions beyond the 3 we observe. These extra dimensions must be compactified, curled up into tiny shapes too small to detect. And the number of ways to compactify the extra dimensions is not 1 or 100 or 1,000,000. It is estimated at 10 to the 500, 10 to the 500th power. A number so large that it is meaningless in any human terms. Each compactification gives a different vacuum, different physics, different particle content, different coupling constants, different Higgs, VeV, 10 to the 500 different possible universes. And if eternal inflation is correct, then all of these vacua are realized somewhere in the multiverse. Every possible set of constants exists. Every possible physics plays out. We happen to be in one of the rare vacua where the constants allow life. The multiverse explanation troubles many physicists deeply. It is not testable, not falsifiable, not science in the traditional sense. If every possible set of constants is realized somewhere, then the theory predicts everything, which means it predicts nothing. Nothing is excluded. Nothing is surprising. Nothing requires explanation. Steven Weinberg, who was the first to apply the anthropic argument successfully to predict the approximate value of the cosmological constant before it was measured, has called it a somewhat disappointing outcome. David Gross, the Nobel laureate and former director of the Kavli Institute, has called it a form of giving up. Paul Steinhardt at Princeton has called it the theory of anything. The multiverse might be real. Eternal inflation provides a mechanism. String theory provides the landscape, but accepting the multiverse means accepting that the deepest question in physics, why do the constants have these values, has no deeper answer. The answer is luck, cosmic lottery, statistical selection, not law, not principle, not reason, not intention. Just probability, applied to an ensemble too large to comprehend. The third answer is the one that physics departments do not discuss, but that most human beings who have ever lived have considered in extraordinary detail. Design. Intentional calibration. The constants are fine-tuned because an intelligence fine-tuned them. The invisible foundation has the specific value it has because the value was chosen, selected, intended, calculated by a mind that wanted atoms and stars and planets and oceans and forests and neurons and consciousness and love and mathematics and physics and beings who could build machines to discover the foundation and stand in an auditorium in Geneva and weep when they found it. Physics cannot evaluate this answer using its standard methods. Design is not a scientific hypothesis in the Popperian sense. It makes no specific quantitative prediction that differs from the other explanations. It cannot be tested at the LHC, cannot be measured in a detector, cannot be confirmed at 5 sigma. It exists outside the methodology of physics. This is not a weakness of the argument. It is a statement about the boundaries of the methodology. Physics describes how the universe works. Physics does not answer why the universe works this way rather than some other way. The why question is beyond the scope of the tool. Like asking a thermometer to measure color. The thermometer is not broken. Color is not the kind of thing thermometers measure. But consider what physics has established as of this moment, without interpretation, without theology, without any claim beyond what the data and the mathematics support. An invisible field fills all of space. This field gives mass to the fundamental particles that constitute all matter. Without this field, nothing in the universe would have the mass needed to form structure. The value of this field, 246 GeV, is fine-tuned to allow the existence of atoms, stars, chemistry, and life. The fine-tuning of the Higgs boson mass is extreme to 1 part in 10 to the 34. Physics has no confirmed explanation for this fine-tuning. Supersymmetry has not been found after decades of searching. The multiverse is not testable and may never be. The hierarchy problem remains unsolved. And every major religious tradition says the following: an invisible presence fills all of reality. This presence gives being to all things. Without this presence, nothing would exist in structured form. This presence chose to create a universe that contains conscious beings. The creation was intentional, deliberate, purposeful. The fine-tuning was not accidental. The values were selected by an intelligence that transcends the physical universe, an intelligence that wanted the universe to produce beings capable of recognizing the signs, capable of discovering the foundation, capable of standing in awe before the precision. The Quran says, "Indeed, in the creation of the heavens and the earth and the alternation of the night and the day are signs for those of understanding." Quran 3 to 190. The Arabic word is ayat, signs, evidences, markers of intention, not accidents, not random fluctuations in a meaningless multiverse, signs placed by an intelligence that wanted them to be found. The fine-tuning of the Higgs VeV to 1 part in 10 to the 34 is either the most extreme coincidence in physical reality, or it is an ayah, a sign, a marker of intention. The Quran does not ask you to choose between science and faith. The Quran asks you to look at the creation and recognize the signs. The signs are the physics. The fine-tuning is the evidence. The precision is the signature. The Christian tradition says the heavens declare the glory of God and the firmament shows his handiwork. Psalm 19:1. Paul in Romans 1:20 says that God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse. The invisible qualities clearly seen from what has been made, an invisible field clearly demonstrated by the particle it produces, the eternal power that gives mass to all things, the divine nature revealed through the fine-tuning that allows existence. The parallel is not metaphorical, it is structural. The Hindu tradition says Brahman created the universe through tapas, concentrated, creative intention. Not accident, not randomness, focused, deliberate, creative will. The Nasadiya Sukta, the creation hymn of the Rig Veda, asks, who really knows? Who can declare from where it was produced? The hymn acknowledges uncertainty about the mechanism of creation while affirming that creation was intentional, that the universe came from something, that the something had intention, that the intention selected the parameters. I am not arguing that physics has proven God exists. Physics has not. I cannot say this clearly enough. The fine-tuning does not prove design. The hierarchy problem does not prove a creator. The failure to find supersymmetry does not prove that the constants were chosen by an intelligence. What I am arguing is more specific and more honest. Physics has discovered an invisible foundation that is fine-tuned to allow existence. Physics cannot explain the fine-tuning, and the explanation that every contemplative tradition independently offers an intentional intelligence that calibrated the foundation is structurally identical to what the physics requires. It is not proven by the physics, but it is consistent with it, compatible with it, and the most natural reading of it, unless you prefer an untestable multiverse of 10 to the 500 universes to explain away the precision, which is also faith. Just faith in mathematics instead of faith in God. In part 4, we bring everything together. The Higgs field as ground of being, the spontaneous symmetry breaking as the moment of creation from symmetry to structure, from nothing to something, the fine-tuning as the signature of intention, the God particle not as a marketing gimmick invented by a publisher to sell books, but as an accidentally accurate description of what physics has actually found at the foundation of reality, an invisible field that fills all of space, that gives being to what would otherwise be formless. That is calibrated with 34 digits of precision to produce a universe capable of producing beings, capable of discovering the field and weeping in the front row when they find it. Let me tell you what physics has found. Not what it might mean, not what the theologians say, not what the mystics claim, what it has found, what is confirmed, what is measured, what is known to 5 sigma and 12 decimal places, and $13.25 billion worth of experimental confirmation. There is a field, the Higgs field. It fills all of space, every cubic nanometer, from the interior of a proton to the void between galaxy, superclusters. The field has a non-zero value everywhere, 246 GeV. This value is not zero. The field in its lowest energy state is not empty, is not off, is not absent. The field is on, is present, is active, everywhere, at every moment. Since approximately 1/1,000,000,000th of a second after the Big Bang, when the universe cooled below approximately 10 to the 15 Kelvin and the electroweak symmetry broke and the field settled into its current non-zero state. For 13.8 billion years the field has been here, silently, invisibly, undetectably by any human sense or any instrument until 2012, giving mass to every electron, every quark, every W and Z boson in the universe, making atoms possible, making chemistry possible, making stars possible, making you possible. This is not a hypothesis. This is a measured fact. The particle that proves the field exists has been produced, detected, and characterized by 2 independent experiments involving over 6,000 physicists, using 2 different detector technologies, analyzing different data sets, and arriving at the same result independently. 125.1 GeV 5 sigma. Both experiments. The field is real, and this field has properties that no other field in physics has. First, the Higgs field is the only fundamental scalar field in nature. Every other field in the standard model is a vector field or a spinor field. The electromagnetic field is a vector field. The gluon field is a vector field. The electron field is a spinor field. These fields have directionality. They point somewhere. They have orientation. The Higgs field is scalar. It has no direction, no orientation, no arrow, just a value, a number at every point in space, the simplest kind of field possible, the most fundamental kind, the kind that has no structure beyond its value, pure magnitude, pure presence, pure being without quality. Every mystical tradition describes the ground of being in exactly these terms: without quality, without direction, without attribute, without structure, just presence, just being. The Sufi concept of Dat, the divine essence, is described as without attribute, without direction, without qualification, pure being. The Hindu concept of Nirguna Brahman is Brahman without qualities, without form, without direction, without any property except existence itself. The Buddhist concept of Sunyata is emptiness that is not empty, a ground that has no qualities but from which all qualities arise. The Christian concept of the Godhead, as described by Meister Eckhart and the apophatic theologians, is God beyond all attributes, beyond all descriptions, beyond all qualities. The God about whom nothing can be said except that God is pure being, scalar, without direction, without quality, without structure, just value, just presence. The Higgs field is the physical realization of what every mystical tradition describes as the ground of being, not metaphorically. Structurally, a scalar field with no direction and no quality beyond its value, pervading all of space and making existence possible. This is not proof that the Higgs field is God. This is the observation that the Higgs field has the same mathematical structure as what the traditions describe when they describe the foundation of reality. Second, the Higgs field is the only field in the standard model whose vacuum state is not zero. Every other field has a vacuum expectation value of 0. The electromagnetic field in empty space is 0. The electron field in empty space is 0. The gluon field in empty space is 0. All 0. Empty. Off. Absent. The vacuum of every other field is nothing. The vacuum of the Higgs field is something. 246 GeV of something. The Higgs field is the one field that refuses to be 0. The one field that insists on being present even when everything else is absent. The one field that says I am here even in the void, even in the emptiness, even in the vacuum, even when there is nothing else. The Higgs field is there. 246 GeV. Always, everywhere. This is the burning bush. This is the I am, that I am of Exodus 3:14. Moses asked God for a name. Every other entity in the ancient world had a name that described what it did or where it came from. Names were labels, descriptors, functions. Moses expected a name like that. Instead, God says, Ehyeh, Asher, Ehyeh, I am, that I am. Not a name that describes a function, an ontological statement, a declaration of being. My nature is existence. My identity is existence. I do not have existence as a property. I am existence. Existence is not something I do. Existence is what I am. The Higgs field is the field whose nature is to be non-zero. Other fields can be 0. Other fields default to 0. The Higgs field cannot. The Higgs field's ground state, its most fundamental state, its resting state, its identity is non-zero, 246 GeV. Not zero, not nothing. Something, always something, necessarily something, I am. Not as poetry, as physics, as the measured vacuum expectation value of a scalar field that cannot be zero without destroying the structure of the universe. The Islamic tradition expresses this with extraordinary philosophical precision through the concept of wajib al-wujud, the necessary being. Developed by Ibn Sina Avicenna in the 11th century, Ibn Sina argued that all beings fall into two categories. Mumkin al-wujud, contingent being that might or might not exist, being that depends on something else for its existence. Your chair is contingent. It exists because someone made it from wood that grew from a tree that grew from a seed. At every step, the existence depends on something prior. Remove any step, and the chair does not exist. Every physical object, every particle, every atom, every star, every galaxy is contingent. Could have not existed. Depends on prior causes. But the chain of contingent causes cannot extend backward forever. There must be something at the bottom of the chain that is not contingent, something that does not depend on anything else for its existence, something that must exist, something whose nature is existence itself. Wajib al-wujud, the necessary being, the being whose existence is necessary, who cannot not exist. And this is what the Higgs field is in the Standard Model. The one field that cannot be zero. The one field whose non-zero value is not contingent on any external cause but is the natural ground state of its own potential. Every other field can be zero. Is zero in the vacuum. Depends on excitations from external sources to become non-zero. The Higgs field does not depend on external excitation. The Higgs field excites itself, finds its own non-zero minimum, exists at 246 GeV because that is its nature, because its potential demands it, because it is the necessary field, the wajib al-wujud of the Standard Model. Third, the Higgs field creates mass through interaction. Mass is not an intrinsic property of particles. Mass is a relationship between the particle and the Higgs field. The electron is not born with mass. The electron acquires mass by interacting with the Higgs field. The top quark does not carry mass as an inherent property. The top quark has mass because it interacts with the Higgs field 340,000 times more strongly than the electron. Mass is relational. Mass is participatory. Mass is a consequence of interaction with the invisible foundation. This is theologically precise. Every tradition says that being is not intrinsic to creatures. Being is a gift from the Creator. Creatures do not exist on their own. Creatures exist because God gives them existence. God sustains them in being. God's continuous creative act is what keeps the universe in existence at every moment. Thomas Aquinas called this creatio continua, continuous creation. The idea that God does not create the universe once and step back. God creates the universe at every instant. Every moment of existence is a fresh act of creation. If God withdrew his sustaining power, everything would cease to exist instantly, not gradually, instantly. The Higgs field does exactly this. If the Higgs field turned off, if its value went to zero at any point, all particles at that point would become massless instantly, would fly apart at the speed of light, would cease to form atoms, would cease to constitute matter, would cease to be anything structured. Every atom at that point would dissolve in less than a femtosecond. Every molecule would disintegrate. Every cell would explode into a spray of massless particles moving at the speed of light in every direction. Not because something destroyed them, because the foundation that was holding them together withdrew, because the field that was giving them mass stopped giving. because the continuous creation ceased. The Higgs field is not a one-time gift of mass delivered at the Big Bang and then left to run on its own. The Higgs field is a continuous sustaining of mass at every point, at every moment. The field is active right now, giving mass to the electrons in your neurons right now, giving mass to the quarks in your atoms right now, enabling the electromagnetic bonds that hold your molecules together right now. If the field fluctuated to zero in the volume of your body for even a Planck time 10 to the negative 43 seconds, the consequences would be catastrophic. Your entire physical structure depends on the field being non-zero at every point inside you at every instant. This is what the traditions mean by sustaining. Not creating once and walking away, creating continuously. Sustaining at every moment. The Quran says, Allah holds the heavens and the earth lest they cease. Quran 35-41. Not held in the past tense. Holds. Present tense. Continuous. Ongoing. Right now. The heavens and the earth exist because they are being held in existence by a sustaining power that operates at every moment, that cannot pause, that cannot withdraw without everything ceasing. The Higgs field at 246 GeV everywhere in the universe at every moment for 13.8 billion years without interruption is the physics of this claim. The continuous creation, the sustained being, the held existence. The Islamic tradition says, La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. There is no power and no strength except through God. Nothing has independent causal power. Nothing acts on its own. Everything operates through God's sustaining will. The electron does not orbit the proton on its own. The electron orbits the proton because the Higgs field gives it mass, and mass is what allows orbiting. The mass comes from the field. The field is everywhere. The field is always on. The power to form atoms, to generate chemistry, to sustain structure comes from the field, not from the particles themselves. The particles without the field are massless, powerless, formless, flying at light speed, structureless. The power and the strength come from the field. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. There is no mass and no structure except through the Higgs field. Fourth, the Higgs field brought the universe from symmetry to structure through spontaneous symmetry breaking. This is the physics of creation, not metaphorical creation, literal physical creation. The transition from a universe with no structure to a universe with structure. From nothing interesting to everything interesting, from the void to the world. Before the electroweak phase transition in the first trillionth of a second after the Big Bang, the universe was symmetric, perfectly symmetric. The electroweak symmetry SU2 times U1 was unbroken. The Higgs field was at zero. Its thermal energy was too high for it to settle into the non-zero minimum of its potential. All particles were massless. All forces were unified at a single strength. The universe was a plasma of indistinguishable massless particles interacting through indistinguishable forces at the same strength. Nothing was different from anything else. The electron was identical to the neutrino in its masslessness. The W boson was identical to the photon. The universe was perfectly balanced, perfectly symmetric, perfectly homogeneous, and perfectly featureless. Perfect symmetry is perfect monotony. Perfect balance is perfect boredom. Perfect unity is perfect uniformity. There was no structure, no distinction, no differentiation, no thing, just the uniform, undifferentiated potential of a symmetric void. Then the universe cooled. The temperature dropped below approximately 10 to the 15 Kelvin, approximately 100 GeV, and the Higgs field underwent a phase transition, like water freezing into ice. Like a ferromagnet cooling below its Curie temperature, the field rolled from its unstable symmetric state at zero to its stable asymmetric state at 246 GeV. The symmetry broke, spontaneously, without external cause, without anything pushing it. The field found its own ground state, its own minimum, its own resting place, and the resting place was not symmetric. The consequences were immediate and total. The W plus and W minus and Z bosons acquired masses of 80 and 91 GeV. The photon remained massless. The electromagnetic force and the weak force, which had been one force, became two distinct forces with different strengths and different ranges. The quarks acquired their masses through Yukawa couplings to the now non-zero field. The up quark 2.2 MeV, the down quark 4.7 MeV, the strange quark 96 MeV, the charm quark 1.28 GeV, the bottom quark 4.18 GeV, the top quark 173 GeV, each different, each distinct, each with its own unique relationship to the field. The leptons acquired their masses. The electron 0.511 MeV, the muon 105.7 MeV, the tau 1.777 GeV. Distinction arose, differentiation arose, hierarchy arose, structure arose. From the symmetric void came the asymmetric richness of the material world. From unity came multiplicity, from sameness came difference. From the featureless ground came the infinite diversity of form. From the formless came the formed. This is the creation story told by the standard model of particle physics. Not told by a priest or an imam or a rabbi or a monk. Told by the equations. Told by the data. Told by the most precisely confirmed theory in the history of science. In the beginning, the universe was symmetric and without form and void, and the field settled into its non-zero value. And there was mass, and the field separated the massive from the massless, and from the separation came distinction, and from distinction came atoms, and from atoms came stars, and from stars came the elements, and from the elements came planets, and from planets came oceans, and from oceans came life, and from life came consciousness, and from consciousness came the question, why is there something rather than nothing? And the answer is the field that broke the symmetry, the field that chose the value, the field that made being possible. The Quran begins with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful. Every surah begins with this invocation. Every act of creation, every moment of existence, every breath, every thought, every quantum interaction occurs in the name of the foundation, Bismillah, in the name of the ground, in the name of the field, in the name of the invisible presence that makes the visible possible. The universe begins with the Higgs field settling into its non-zero value. The Quran begins with the invocation of the presence that settles into every moment. Both are the first act. Both initiate everything that follows. Both are the invisible beginning that makes the visible possible. Both are the ground from which the world emerges. The Torah begins Bereshit, bara Elohim, et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, tohu vavohu, without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And God said, let there be light. And there was light. And God separated the light from the darkness. The universe before electroweak symmetry breaking was tohu vavohu, without form and void, all particles massless, all forces indistinguishable, no structure, no distinction, no separation. Darkness upon the face of the deep, and the Higgs field settled into its non-zero value, and there was mass, and mass separated the massive from the massless. The photon remained massless light. The W and Z acquired mass darkness in the sense of short-range forces hidden from direct observation, and from the separation came distinction, and from distinction came structure, and from structure came the heavens and the earth. The Hindu tradition says the universe emerged from Brahman through a creative act. The Nasadiya Sukta, the creation hymn of the Rig Veda, says in the beginning there was neither existence nor non-existence, neither being nor non-being. Then that one breathed without breath by its own power. Before symmetry breaking, the universe was neither what we would call existing nor non-existing. The particles were there, but had no mass, had no structure, had no form, were neither something nor nothing, were potential without actuality. And then the field settled, the symmetry broke. Potential became actual, the formless became formed, the one became many. The Buddhist tradition says all phenomena arise from conditions through dependent origination. Nothing exists independently. Everything arises from the interaction of causes and conditions. Mass does not exist independently. Mass arises from the interaction between particles and the Higgs field. Structure does not exist independently. Structure arises from the consequences of mass. Atoms do not exist independently. Atoms arise from the electromagnetic binding of massive particles. Everything is dependent. Everything is conditional. Everything arises from the field. Pratitya samutpada, dependent origination. The Buddhist doctrine of creation without a creator, but with a field on which everything depends, a field without which nothing arises, a field that is the condition for all conditions. Now I want to say something carefully, something that I have been building toward across 4 parts and 17,000 words. Something that is not a claim about what has been proven, but a claim about what has been observed. What the structure looks like, what the pattern suggests. The Higgs field has 5 properties that physics has confirmed. 1. It is invisible. 2. It fills all of space. 3. Without it, nothing has the mass needed for structure, nothing has form. 4. Its value is fine-tuned to allow the existence of atoms, stars, chemistry, and life. 5. It brought the universe from featureless symmetry to structured existence through a phase transition. Every major religious tradition describes God with 5 properties that contemplatives have reported across 4,000 years. 1. God is invisible. 2. God is omnipresent, fills all of reality. 3. Without God, nothing exists. Nothing has being. Nothing has form. 4. God created the universe with intention, calibrated it to produce life. 5. God created the universe from nothing, brought existence from the void. 5 properties, 5 matches, point by point, not vague analogies where you squint and see a pattern. Specific structural correspondences between the measured properties of a physical field and the described properties of the divine ground. The Higgs field is invisible. God is invisible. The Higgs field is everywhere. God is everywhere. Without the Higgs field, nothing has form. Without God, nothing has being. The Higgs field is fine-tuned to 1 part in 10 to the 34. God acts with intention and precision. The Higgs field brought structure from symmetry through a phase transition. God brought creation from the void through a creative act. Each of these correspondences was discovered independently. The physicists did not read the Quran before writing down the Higgs Lagrangian. The Sufis did not study quantum field theory before describing the divine essence as without quality, without direction, without attribute. The Hindus did not calculate vacuum expectation values before describing Niguna Brahman as the qualityless ground from which all qualities arise. The convergence is not the result of borrowing or influence or motivated reasoning. It is the result of 2 independent traditions of inquiry, physics and contemplation, investigating the same question. what is the foundation of existence, and arriving at structurally identical answers using completely different methods, separated by centuries and continents and languages and worldviews. The question is what to do with this observation, and I want to present two responses honestly, because the honest answer is that neither response is proven and both are defensible. One response is to dismiss it, to say the parallels are coincidence, that the 5-point match between the Higgs field and the theological ground of being is pattern recognition applied to noise, that humans evolved to see faces in clouds and meaning in randomness, and this is simply a sophisticated version of that instinct, that the Higgs field is a quantum field described by a Lagrangian with specific coupling constants, and the theological ground of being is a pre-scientific attempt to explain existence that happens to share some structural features with the physical description by accident. This is a defensible position. The parallels might be coincidence. The fine-tuning might be explained by a multiverse. New physics might solve the hierarchy problem tomorrow. The contemplative traditions might be wrong about everything except the structure they share with the Higgs field. The other response is to take the convergence seriously, not as proof, as evidence, as a data point, as an observation that demands consideration, even if it does not demand conclusion. To note that physics, the most rigorous methodology ever developed by human civilization, when it investigates the foundation of material existence, discovers a structure that matches point by point what contemplatives reported after decades of disciplined introspection. To note that the match is not one property but 5, not vague but specific, not from one tradition but from 4 independent traditions across 4 continents. To note that the fine-tuning of the Higgs field is real, is measured, is extreme, and is unexplained by any confirmed physics. And to note that the traditional explanation, an intentional intelligence that calibrated the foundation, is at minimum consistent with the data, and at maximum the most natural reading of the data. This does not prove God exists. I have said this before, and I will say it one final time because intellectual honesty demands it. Nothing in this series proves God exists. The Higgs field is a physical field. God, as described by the traditions, transcends the physical. The Higgs field is described by equations. God is described by experience. The Higgs field is measured by detectors. God is encountered in silence. These are different modes of knowing, different epistemologies, different languages, and the fact that they converge on the same structure does not prove they describe the same reality. It suggests it. It is consistent with it. It points toward it, but it does not prove it. Peter Higgs was an atheist. He did not believe in God. He never claimed his work had theological implications. He found the name God, particle, embarrassing and inappropriate. He said publicly that it might offend people who are religious. He preferred to call it the scalar boson, or simply the Higgs particle. He spent his career in mathematics, in equations, in the clean, precise, austere world of quantum field theory, where questions about God are not asked because they are not the kind of questions that equations answer. He was right that equations do not answer questions about God, but he might have been wrong about the name. Because Peter Higgs, an atheist working alone in a modest office in Edinburgh in the summer of 1964, described in 2.5 pages of mathematics the exact structure that every mystic who ever sat in silence described as the foundation of reality, an invisible field, filling all of space, giving being to all things, without which nothing has form, present even in the void. The atheist did not intend to describe God. The atheist intended to solve the mass problem of the standard model, but the solution, the field, the mechanism, the mathematics, has the same structure as the theological ground of being, the same properties, the same function, the same role in the architecture of reality. The mystic Meister Eckhart sat in silence in 14th century Germany and described the Godhead as the ground beneath all being, the invisible foundation without quality or attribute that gives rise to all qualities and all attributes. Peter Higgs sat with equations in 20th century Scotland and described a scalar field with no direction and no quality beyond its value that gives mass to all particles and makes all structure possible. Eckhart and Higgs never met, never read each other's work, worked in different centuries with different methods in different traditions, pursuing different questions, and found the same thing: at the foundation, at the ground, at the invisible base on which all visible reality is built. This convergence does not prove anything. Science and theology use different methods and different standards of evidence. A mystical experience is not a 5 sigma measurement. A 5 sigma measurement is not a mystical experience. The two forms of evidence are incommensurable, cannot be compared directly, cannot be weighed on the same scale, but they can point in the same direction, and they do. Both point to an invisible, omnipresent foundation that gives being to all things. Both find it at the deepest level of their respective investigations. Both report the same structural properties, and neither can fully explain it. Liederman wanted to call it the goddamn particle. The publisher changed it to the God particle. Physics spent 48 years and $13.25 billion confirming that the particle exists, and the universe seems to agree with the publisher. You are made of atoms. The atoms are made of quarks and electrons. The quarks and electrons have mass because they interact with an invisible field that fills all of space. The field has a value of 246 GeV. This value is fine-tuned to 34 decimal places to allow atoms to exist, to allow chemistry to work, to allow stars to burn carbon in their cores, to allow planets to form around those stars, to allow water to have its remarkable properties, to allow amino acids to fold into proteins, to allow DNA to encode information, to allow neurons to fire, to allow you to exist, to allow you to pick up your phone and feel its weight and wonder where that weight comes from. The weight comes from the field. The field is everywhere. The field is invisible. The field is the foundation. The field has been here for 13.8 billion years without interruption. Sustaining, giving, making possible. And the field has a name that a publisher chose to sell books, and that physics confirmed to 5 sigma, and that the structure of reality seems to endorse with every property it reveals. The God particle, not because it is God, because it does what every tradition says God does, makes existence possible, gives form to the formless, sustains being at every moment without pause, is present even in the void, is everywhere and always, is the invisible foundation on which everything visible is built, is fine-tuned with a precision that exceeds any human capability by a factor of 10 to the 30, is the answer to the question, why? Is there something rather than nothing? There is something rather than nothing because there is a field. The field is non-zero. The field gives mass. Mass allows structure. Structure allows complexity. Complexity allows life. Life allows consciousness. Consciousness allows the question, and the question leads back to the field, a circle, a loop, the foundation producing beings who discover the foundation, the ground giving rise to minds that investigate the ground, the invisible making visible beings who prove the invisible is real. And it was here before you noticed, and it will be here after you stop noticing. And it is here now, in every atom of your body, in every space between atoms, in the air you breathe and the chair you sit on and the screen you are watching. 246 GeV, quietly, invisibly, necessarily, giving you mass, giving you form, giving you being. The way it has given being to everything that has ever existed and everything that ever will exist. The invisible foundation is real. Physics measured it. 4 traditions described it. The fine-tuning demands an explanation. The name was accidentally accurate. And the question of whether the foundation was intentionally calibrated by a transcendent intelligence or cosmically coincidental in a multiverse of 10 to the 500 possibilities is the question that physics leaves open, and every human being must answer for themselves. Because some questions are bigger than science. Not because science is small, because the questions are that large. The question of why the invisible foundation has the value it has. The question of why there is a foundation at all. The question of why the foundation produces beings who can discover it. These questions fit inside no equation, no Lagrangian, no standard model, no accelerator. These questions require a different instrument. Not a detector, not a magnet, not a computer. A different kind of instrument. The kind that every tradition has been building and refining for 4,000 years. The kind that sits in silence and investigates the foundation from the inside. The kind that the physicists in Geneva and the mystics in their cells have been using in parallel for centuries without knowing they were investigating the same thing. The answer is yours. The field is real. The fine-tuning is extreme. The parallels are specific. The convergence is undeniable. And the conclusion is not mine to draw. It is yours.